Hello to all the debt warriors listening, and welcome back to another episode of Millennial Debt Domination. I'm your host, Katie Fata. With the start of the new year quickly approaching, it's a good time to start thinking about New Year's resolutions. A lot of people base their resolutions off something financial. Having a goal to make extra money to put towards your savings and your debt is a great goal. On today's episode, I'll be discussing how to supercharge your savings. Today, I'll be joined by Beverly Harzog. Beverly is a credit analyst and columnist at U.S. News. Beverly has a wealth of knowledge on all things debt and savings, and she joins me to share her insights on today's topic. Beverly and I will be discussing the best way to start saving if you haven't done so already, no spend challenges, side hustles, emergency funds, and much more. Now, let's get to my interview with Beverly. Hi, Beverly. Thanks for being on the podcast today.
Oh, thanks for having me. I'm very excited about it.
Yeah, I'm definitely excited to talk to you too. With the new year coming up, it's a great time to talk about savings. So today we're going to be talking about supercharging your savings, especially ahead of the new year. So I guess to get started, what's the best way to start saving if you haven't started already?
Well, the best thing to do is to start right now. So if you haven't started already, don't go into panic or anything. But it's only too late if you don't start right now. So today, even if you've only got, a small amount to open an account with, go ahead and do that. And as you see your fund begin to increase over time, you're going to get very excited about that.
Yeah, it's definitely better to put something. Something is always better than nothing, right?
Absolutely. You have to start somewhere. So, don't beat yourself up over it if you don't have anything right now. Just get started.
Right. So where are different options that someone can house their new savings accounts?
This is a great question because there are some options where if you use them, your emergency fund might not be as accessible quickly, such as a CD or treasury bonds. When you do something like that, yes, it might be very safe. You might want to put some of your savings in there. You wouldn't want to keep your emergency fund there though, because you can't get it in a hurry. You'll have to make a commitment. Right. Other options, where it's really easy to get your money would be just a normal account with a bank. Another option are online savings accounts, and they say high yield. They used to be really high yield. I don't really consider them high yield anymore, but it is another option, and you will get a little bit of interest on that. There are all kinds of rules, though, so you have to know how much you have to, put down for a deposit, to get the account started. And you want to, check and see if there are any fees or rules. Some of these online savings accounts have rules about how many times you can withdraw from that in a year. So you want to be sure you just know what the rules are. That doesn't mean you shouldn't go for that, but it just means that you need to know what the rules are so that you don't get into trouble, if you can't draw when you actually need the emergency fund.
Yeah.
So those are a couple of options. I've offered getting interest, even if it's just a little amount. So I do like the online savings accounts for that.
Yeah, that's a good point. Even the interest is so small when you first start, but at least it's something,
Right. Oh, and a money market is also a money market fund is also another good place to put it, and that's fairly accessible. You'll get some interest, so any of those would be fine. But again, the most important thing is just to open that account. You can always change where you're keeping it later.
Right.
If you want to. So don't get caught up in the logistics of, where you're going to do this and spend another month thinking about it. Just get started.
Right. That's a great point. So what are some ways someone can prioritize their savings in the new year?
Yeah, this can be a challenge if you're living paycheck to paycheck. And, and I understand what that feels like. I got into trouble with credit cards many years ago because I didn't understand that I really needed to have, a big savings account for emergencies. That got me into some trouble.
Mhm.
So one thing you can do is, look at your budget. If you don't have a budget, please set one up, because if you don't have the budget and track your spending, you're going to end up spending more than you plan to, because you're not keeping track of what's going out. Your cash flow usually can't keep up if you don't really have some sort of a system, to make sure that, you don't overspend.
Mhm.
So one thing you can do, look at your budget and see if there are some discretionary expenses. If you're eating out, 4 or 5 times a week, maybe you can rein that in a little bit.
Mhm.
So any expenses that you don't actually have to make, you might want to pull back on that, even if just temporarily, to get your fund going and to try to, build that fund so you have a little bit of financial security. And another way is to, get a side hustle if you have to,
Mhm.
just to sort of, have an increment to the account, on top of what you make as your own income. So there are a couple of different ways to do it. I wish I could say it's all painless, but sometimes you have to experience a tiny bit of pain at least, just to get this thing going and get it going in the right direction.
Yeah, I like since you brought up discretionary, expenses, I think that
Mhm.
kind of leads into what my next question was going to be about, like, doing a no spend challenge. So what would a no spend challenge be?
Yeah, I see a lot of these online on social
Mhm.
media, and it can actually be a great way to practice some discipline, because you feel motivated, because you set a goal. And I believe in setting goals, whether it's financial or just life goals in general. But with your financial goals, in a no spend challenge, you want to say something like, okay, for the next 3 months, and you can do as long as you like. There are like no spend years or no
Yeah.
spend months.
Yeah.
But so do what works for you. But don't make it so long that you're going to fail. Okay. That's one thing that people get wrong with goals. It's not like you have to have this goal and stretch yourself to your limit. You want to be sure it's difficult, but not too difficult. You want to experience some success. So try that no spend challenge a week at a time if you have to. Say, okay, I'm not going to eat out this week.
Yeah.
There's your no spend. I'm not going to go buy new clothes or shoes, this entire month. So you can do it. It doesn't have to be all out, no spending at all, unless that's what you need to do to get on track. That's great if you can do that. Or it can just be in areas where you're overspending. So I want to, make sure people know that they can think about this in a couple of ways. It doesn't have to be all or nothing,
Mhm.
because sometimes, that can lead to failure because you've taken away too much, and we do need to take care of ourselves a little bit. A little bit of self-care doesn't hurt.
Yeah, I think that's a good point, is to start small, because there are so many things online, like no spend year or
Hmm.
month. I
Yes.
even think you could start with like a weekend. That's what I
Hmm.
sometimes will do,
I
is like a
agree.
no spend weekend.
I agree. I broke it down to 1 week, but you were
Mhm.
correct. A no spend weekend is a good idea. I like that.
Yeah. I think because, like, that's personally where I tend to spend the most money, is on the weekends. So that's kind of
Yes,
where I started.
I think most of us do. You're
Mhm.
not online for work, but you're online because you've got some free time, and
Mhm.
it can be easy to overspend. That's where that budget comes in too. Go ahead and
Yeah.
give yourself a budget for some splurges now and then. Just be sure
Yeah.
it's budgeted.
No, yeah, I think that's some great advice. I love that. So, we kind of broke down what a no spend challenge is. Now, how can that help boost someone's savings?
It is a great way to boost your
Mhm.
savings, as long as you know how much you're saving, because you're not spending, no matter if it's just one area or just across the board. You're not spending on things that aren't essential. Okay. And that's a big difference. You hear a lot about needs versus wants. All right, so let's say you cut back a whole lot on your wants, and that money that you've saved that you would normally spend on those items, that goes right to your emergency fund or your
Mhm.
savings account. And there is a difference between the two. But if you don't have much of an emergency fund, you want to get that one going for sure, because that's how you survive a crisis.
Mm-hmm.
So the no spend challenge is a great way to boost your savings, as long as you put it in the right place where it's supposed to be and don't just leave it, like jumbled in a checking account or something.
Yeah.
Have it allocated. Actually take
Mm-hmm.
the step to allocate it to your budget, your emergency fund or to your savings account.
Yeah, definitely. It could definitely help boost your savings. And so can a side hustle, which we kind of talked about
Right.
earlier. So maybe for someone's not listening, what is a side hustle?
Yeah. Whenever I think about savings, sometimes I go right to side hustle.
Right. Yeah.
Because like I mentioned, for many people, unfortunately they are living paycheck to paycheck. So
Right.
how in the world can they, build an emergency fund? But the answer, of course, is to get a side hustle.
Right.
Another way, though, is to ask for a raise at work if that's possible. Only you know your situation.
Right.
So you might be able to do that. But if that doesn't work, then a side hustle is a great way to bring in that extra income. And it could be something that, you just, it's a side hustle. You don't have to quit your day job.
Right.
For
Exactly.
this, do it, keep going to work, but you could start something on the side. Let's say you're a great writer. You might be able to do some freelance writing or editing on the side. People who speak different languages will sometimes teach people a language or English as a second language, classes in that. And you can also mentor people in a variety of different things. So, I'm kind of getting into some examples
Yeah.
right here.
Yeah, definitely. That was kind of going to be my next question. And I was
Yeah.
also going to say nowadays, I feel like it can be easier to get a side hustle, especially with all the online stuff. You could
Yes,
get one and not even have to leave your house. So what are some examples of
absolutely.
those or other kinds of
Uh-huh.
traditional side hustles?
Yeah, one thing you can do is, respond to surveys. People actually get paid to do that. You can get paid for so many different things. House sitting, like on a weekend that doesn't interfere with work. Walking people's dogs or pets, or pet sitting in their home for a weekend. Many people don't have dogs that, don't do well if they're boarded. So there are so many opportunities for that. And with so many people working at home now, I know many have gone back to work, but there are still some who have worked out sort of a flexible work from home, go to the office a few days a week kind of strategy, which I think is great. And the people who are at home working, maybe they don't have time to walk their dog. So, that is a great opportunity right there. We've mentioned freelance writing, editing, helping people learn a language. You can also teach a class online. There are many different websites where you can put together a course, something you're good at. Maybe it's genealogy. Maybe you enjoy it, you enjoy doing your family tree so much, you want to do this for other people too. So you could get very creative and think about what your special skills are, and we all have them. We all have that superpower inside of us somewhere. Right. And see if you can't monetize that. And also blogging with affiliate relationships, where you get paid a referral fee, all kinds of ways to start a blog.
Yeah, and a lot of them are super flexible.
Mm-hmm.
Even like a ride share, driving a ride share, something like that. A lot of them can be super, super flexible. But
Mm-hmm.
how can you successfully manage your time between your main hustle and your side hustle?
Yes. Well, that is the trick, isn't it? Especially if you have kids, okay? Because if you're working full time and you have kids, that can be very difficult to work in a side hustle, and you might want to just focus it on certain times of the year. For instance, during the holiday season, I'm already seeing so many job openings for holiday season help. And right now is a good time to think about something like that because, there is a labor shortage, and this is a good time just to pick up something on the side for about 6 weeks and maybe pay for your holidays. And if you're a single parent, that makes it very difficult. I understand that. And sometimes sitting costs more than getting a babysitter might cost more than, actually being able to do that side hustle and what you could make. So maybe you sort of pivot and maybe do some babysitting where you can take your kids with you. So there are all kinds of ways to try to work out your time, and time management is really an art. And I think, when you're trying to figure out how you're going to do this side hustle, give yourself a break, because you do not want to overdo this. If you do have a partner, that lives in the same place with you, and you've got kids, well, that's great, because you can sort of help each other out there. You've got a live-in sitter, so to speak. So you do have to figure out a strategy that works with your particular situation.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a good point. I mean, you don't want, I mean, extra income is great, but you don't want to overdo it too much where you're completely burned out as well.
That's right. And, nobody needs that. I mean, it's very important to take care of yourself. If you don't take care of yourself, you can't be there for others. And,
Exactly.
it's important. So, yeah, I'm glad you asked that question about time management, because, there are all these options, but you might have to think about it more carefully, more creatively if you're short on time.
Right, exactly. Because it can be hard to manage your time with one job and life and everything. So,
Absolutely. Now, it's also possible during the holidays, depending on what your job is, that you can let your manager know, I'm open to having extra hours. If somebody, can't come in, or you need to stay late because there's a big sale going on. So get a little bit creative and make it work for you.
yeah, there's definitely, like I said earlier, a lot of different options, especially nowadays, that
Yeah.
you could work with your schedule. You can make it work. And so I think
Right.
there are definitely a lot of options to make
Oh,
extra
yes.
money.
You know, um, we're on a credit chat together a lot, and
Yes.
very often the subject of side hustles comes up, and all you have to do is just Google side hustles, and you're going to find so many lists, and some of them are very creative.
So many. And we actually at Navicor, I wrote a blog for us all about side hustles and did a video on it. So I'll put that in the description of this
Oh,
podcast too. So you can get it there.
absolutely.
So
Absolutely. And
yeah.
I'll be sure to mention that next time we're on that chat and side
Oh,
hustles comes up.
yeah, I'll definitely put that down there and I'll send it over to you so you can get it.
Yes, please do.
So, so once someone has, they're doing no spend challenges and they have their side hustle, now they have extra money. How can they best use this extra money?
Okay, that's going to depend on your personal situation.
Okay.
We talked earlier about the importance of an emergency fund. Now, if you don't have an emergency fund, I want you to at least allocate a good portion of your extra money to that, just so you have that. But let's say that you're interested in, earning extra income just to pay for the family vacation, say, or for, a trip that you want to take on your own. There are a lot of ways you can use some extra money. You can either treat yourself like that, but if you're really hurting and living paycheck to paycheck, think about the emergency fund to put most of that money, just so you've got a cushion. Because if there's one thing we've seen over the last 18 months or so, life can be very unpredictable. I mean, 3 years ago, who would have thought we would have a pandemic? I mean, it never entered my mind. And I think most people would never have considered that even a possibility. It just seemed like something that maybe would happen in 100 years, right? So it's important to have that emergency fund, because things do happen, unfortunately.
Yeah, I definitely agree with that. I'm definitely a big supporter of the emergency fund. So, if somebody doesn't have a savings or a very little savings, but they also have a debt, but they also have debts, what should be prioritized? Their debts or their new savings?
This is a great question, and it can be hard to decide what you want to do here. Now, if you've got debt, say on high interest credit cards, you definitely want to make that somewhat of a priority. And notice I say somewhat, because I think that if you've got debt and you have zero or very limited savings, I think that you could contribute to both with some extra money. And in terms of how much to allocate to each, if you do have that high interest, on credit cards and you've got big balances, maybe you want to put the majority of the money toward that and a smaller amount, towards savings. But it definitely is possible to do both. If you've got a healthy savings, then by all means, pay off your debt, pay it down as quickly as you can. And then, one other step when it comes to debt is make sure that you know how this happened. That might seem like a silly question, but
Right.
it really isn't. If it's a situation where you had a medical illness, or perhaps a divorce or a job loss, these are very unfortunate situations that can cause a lot of, expenses in your life that you weren't expecting.
Right.
So, you just want to be sure that you get to the source of what caused the debt so that you avoid repeating it if it's something such as, impulsive spending, something like that.
Right. Like a mistake you can learn from, basically.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah. So it definitely, I think, is possible to do both. So pay off debt and
Mhm.
save. So even if you have a big savings but a lot of debt, you
Mhm.
shouldn't just like ignore your savings. You should still put some away, even if you want to tackle your debt, right?
Yes, I totally believe that that's what you should be doing because, even if you just have a little bit, let's say you decide to spend 75, spend not spend, but use 75%, of the extra income
Hmm.
towards debt and 25 towards savings, and you can play with those ratios depending on how much you need more savings and how bad that debt is and what type of debt that is. If your debt is a personal loan and it's an installment payment, so you are paying interest, but it's not like the type of interest you pay on, credit cards on a high interest, high APRs. You might, that's not as serious a debt as, say, um, the high interest credit card. So, yeah, take a look at the type of debt and how much you have in your savings, and then you could figure out and allocate, what type of ratio would work best in your situation.
Yeah, it definitely is different, obviously, from person to person, depending on their
Yes,
situation.
absolutely.
Yeah. So we've definitely talked a lot about emergency funds already, but how can someone start an emergency fund with their extra income? Like, how if they don't have any, what's your recommendations from
Right.
starting from the ground up?
Yeah, and I'm glad we're spending so much time on
Yeah.
emergency funds because
Hmm.
it's so important. And whenever you've got extra income and you're just at the building up your fund stage, allocate it to that. And, we just talked about debt as well. You might need to allocate some to that. But if you possibly can, take that extra income, put it into an emergency fund. And if you can, also set some goals. Let's say you've got this extra income that you anticipate doing this for 6 months. Well,
Uh-huh.
plan ahead. Figure out how much of that you can commit to that emergency fund, and it can be a lot of fun to watch it grow. And maybe halfway through, 3 months through, maybe get a manicure or something. Do something to kind
Yeah.
of treat yourself. Like
Yeah.
nothing expensive. It's not time for a beach vacation, but just or a new, even just a walk outside or a potluck dinner with friends. There are so many ways to just kind of treat yourself a little bit. You reward yourself. I think it's very important as long as it's within your budget.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm glad that you brought up the 3 months because I usually recommend like the starting point should be at
Mhm.
least 3 months worth of living expenses. What do you usually
Yes.
recommend? 3 months?
Okay, I'll start with the ideal and work backwards.
Okay.
The ideal should be 9 to 12 months,
Okay.
but honestly, it's very hard to get that.
Yeah.
So your first step is to get 1 month. All right,
Okay.
and then set a goal for 2 months, and then set a goal for 3 months, and just keep it going. Okay, but you are where you are at the moment, and I do agree with you that 3 months is the absolute minimum you should have.
Yeah. I think that's it's a good starting point for people too.
Absolutely, and
Um
even just 1 month, just do what you can.
exactly, exactly. So we kind of mentioned the pandemic earlier, such a great example of
Mhm.
why you might need an emergency fund, but what
Yes.
are some other uses you would recommend for the emergency fund?
You it can be anything from maybe you need a new roof, maybe your kid needs braces, or maybe you have a medical illness and you have a lot of medical expenses. Many of us have high deductibles so that we can get lower monthly payments. Medical insurance, health insurance is very expensive, so there are emergencies like that. Uh, or perhaps you lost your job. And,
Mhm.
just thinking back to the pandemic, many people lost their jobs for quite a long time because the shutdown dragged out for a long time.
Mhm.
Or in other cases, maybe people still have their job, but their salaries got reduced, at least temporarily.
Right.
A lot of people got behind during that time and had to rely on some credit cards, maybe get a side hustle if you could. But it was such a unique period of time where it was even hard to do anything that wasn't online
Right.
because you were avoiding people. So hopefully we don't have to go through that anytime soon. But you want to be sure that you've got that money available for whatever emergency comes up, and it can be anything in your life that creates an emergency.
Yeah. And how using that emergency fund is better than putting it on a credit card because that's always could be dangerous.
Absolutely.
Right.
Unless and okay, unless you're doing it for the rewards, the credit
Right.
card rewards, and for a fact, not that you think you're going to get a bonus maybe, but for a fact that you can pay it off in full
Yes.
by the due date when it comes. I think that's fine. As long as you're very self-disciplined and you've got
Right.
those rewards, great. Okay. Maybe it, helped you get a little discount on the expense, but absolutely your credit cards are so expensive to carry a balance. That's never a solution for a long-term loan.
Yeah, definitely not. So we kind of earlier mentioned like places to keep your new savings. And are those places going to be the same for your emergency fund? Like where do you recommend to house your emergency fund?
Okay, that's a really good question. And there were so many different options. And we kind of touched on this at the beginning of the podcast. You want to be able to get access to it. That's really important because it's called an emergency fund for a reason. You're not going to get a whole lot of notice about what's going to happen. Uh, so make the decision based on accessibility. All right, being able to get it, hopefully earning a little bit of interest on it. It's really up to you. As long as you just make sure you got access to that, you also want to think about how much you should be saving, and we just touched on that. Uh, you know, the important thing too is to read the fine print for any account. Okay, and people always think, okay, well, credit cards, of course, I'm going to read the fine print, even if they never do, they do know it's there. Okay. But you can read the fine print for accounts, with your local bank, wherever you bank. And when you get to, if you're going to put your fund in a money market or, on a high yield savings account online, whatever you choose, make sure you know what the rules are, how much you have to have for an initial deposit, how many times per year you can, get money out of that account, because you need to be sure. I mean, hopefully you won't have 6 emergencies in one year, but that seems to be sort of a general rule with many of the online savings accounts. So just check that out. Just be sure that and try to get it into a place that meets all these requirements and perhaps gives you the highest interest rate you can get.
Yeah, definitely look at all your options and then make a decision based on your lifestyle.
Absolutely. Yes.
I think that's all my questions for today. Do you have anything else you want to add about savings and stuff like in the topic today?
I loved how you combine questions about debt and savings, because it's important to have a great credit score, and this is how this ties in with your debt. You've got a credit utilization ratio. The amount of credit you've used compares to the amount you have available. As your debt goes down, you start paying that down, you're going to see your credit score go up, assuming that you don't go on a spending spree in the meantime.
Yeah.
While you're paying this down. But do pay attention to that credit score, because the higher your score, the better deals you're going to get on interest rates. And let's say you want to get a mortgage, or you need to get a new car, or even just a used car. Sometimes the interest rates can be high on that. You want to be sure you've got that high credit score so that, should an emergency arise and your fund can't cover it, you're going to be able to borrow money at the lowest cost possible. So just keep that in mind. Stay on top of that credit score. It's so many ways to get it for free these days.
Yeah, I didn't even mention the credit score in this episode, but that's such a good point to bring up. We have a bunch of resources about building your credit score if you need to, and I'll link them down below in the podcast description. But thanks for being on the podcast today, Beverly. I really enjoyed our chat.
Oh, I did too. Thank you so much.
If you haven't decided on a New Year's resolution yet, supercharging your savings might be the perfect one for you. Even if you only have a small amount of money you can save, something is better than nothing. You can start small and grow your payments over time. If you want to do a no-spend challenge, you should also start off small. Start with a no-spend weekend and build your way up to a no-spend week, month, or even year. Like Beverly said, no-spend challenge doesn't mean you have to cut everything out. You could cut out discretionary expenses such as eating out or buying clothes. Challenging yourself to not spend money on these things will help build up your savings. A side hustle is also a great idea to supercharge your extra income. There are so many different options for side hustles now, and you could probably find something that adjusts to your schedule. Make sure you properly manage your time between your side hustle and your main hustle because you don't want to burn out. A hot topic question is always, should I pay off debt or should I invest? The answer is you can and you should do both. It's all about prioritizing how much you put towards your debt and how much you put towards your savings. This will vary from person to person. Lastly, don't forget about your emergency fund. If the last year and a half taught us anything, it's to expect the unexpected. Prepare for this by starting an emergency savings. Try to save at least 3 months worth of living expenses and work your way up to saving more. I think Beverly provided such great insight, and I really enjoyed chatting with her about this topic. I'll put a link to Beverly's website and her social media handles in the description of the podcast. If you have any other questions or want to let her know you enjoyed her on the podcast, you can find her information there. With that being said, that wraps up another episode of Millennial Debt Domination. Don't forget to subscribe to the podcast wherever you're listening. And if you're listening on Apple Podcasts, please rate and review us there. I'll talk to you next time, Millennials, Gen Zers, and everyone else listening. Bye.